This podcast is not sponsored or supported by any business or organization. The views reflected on these podcast episodes are my own. Please be aware I am not a medical expert, travel agent, or any other kind of expert. Hey everyone! Welcome to the Eat, Explore, Love podcast. I'm Ashley. This podcast is based off of my blog of the same name, Eat, Explore, Love. It talks about the unique challenges in traveling around the world when you have celiac disease. Due to sort of popular demand, I decided to also record a podcast to delve a little deeper into my travels and the lessons learned along the way. This week's episode, I am chatting with therapist, author, and YouTube creator Shannon Petrovich. Using her YouTube channel, as well as her book, Out of the Fog, Into the Clear, Journaling to Help You Heal from Toxic Relationships, she helps folks overcome their toxic relationships, especially with narcissists. This discussion was incredibly helpful for me in overcoming my own toxic relationships, and I hope this episode is helpful for you. Hi, Shannon. Thank you so much, and welcome to the Eat, Explore, Love podcast. It's so nice to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Ashley. I really appreciate being here.
So, I find, when I read your bio and read up on you, I found a lot of what you study incredibly interesting and what you're an expert in incredibly interesting. But to kind of introduce, would you mind introducing yourself to myself and to the listeners as well?
Sure. Shannon Petrovich. I've been a therapist for about 36 years. And about 6 years ago, I decided that I wanted to share a lot of the information that I've gathered with a broader audience so that people, millions of people all over the world who don't have access to therapy and maybe don't have access to good therapeutic information. So I started a YouTube channel called Therapist Talks. And then I added another phrase to it, thrive beyond narcissism. Because when I started, it was really a general mental health channel. But what I found was that everybody was really hungry for information about narcissistic relationships and how to cope with those and how to get free of them and what happens if you get free and you still feel awful. So I did all of that, and my focus became on that sort of thing. And then about 2 years ago, I decided I wanted to write a book about it to help people heal. And it's called Out of the Fog, Into the Clear, Journaling to Help You Heal from Toxic Relationships. So that has been out for a couple of years, and I know a lot of people say it's been very helpful for them. And then the third thing I did just this past 6 months was to start a video masterclass and small support group for women healing from toxic relationships. And I also do coaching for men, but that's separate because I feel like the support group needs to be single gender.
There's a lot to unpack there. So, I guess first of all, narcissism you decided to kind of focus on as far as what you share in your information to the outside world, and that's just simply because that's what people were responding most with as far as their experience with.
I guess so. I think the first one I did that hit that nerve was on domestic violence. And my very first job out of grad school was in a domestic violence shelter in Maine. And we never talked about narcissism back then, but that behavior's been around forever. But when I did a video called Domestic Violence, Narcissistic Rage in Action, there was a whole lot of activity and a whole lot of questions that came my way. So then I sort of dovetailed another video off of that, explaining more about how we fall into relationships with toxic people, how to take care of yourself in a toxic relationship, how to set boundaries, how to decide that you've had enough, and what really is narcissism. Because as I unpacked it all, I realized there was just a mountain of stuff on the internet that wasn't even accurate, true, or helpful. So that's why I've kind of um, let myself specialize in that.
So I was actually having a conversation today about, because there's two family members where we have a theory that they are a narcissist. But, obviously none of us are mental health professionals. So, and you said a very interesting thing, that the internet surprise is incorrect. What is the definition, or how do you know that you have a narcissist in your life?
Yeah, and it's like any other mental health issue. It runs the whole gamut from traits all the way to severe, and
Mhm,
a whole bunch of mild to moderate in the middle. So we have to be careful not to sort of weaponize the word.
mhm,
And everybody has narcissistic traits because we are, by definition, kind of self-centered at times and want what we want when we want it. The the severity comes in when you see that somebody is delusionally focused on themselves, that they refuse to acknowledge anybody else's thoughts, feelings, wants, or needs. Everything has to be entirely focused on them, and that they have to be attended to, adored, emotionally fed. And when they don't get what they want, they either implode or explode and make life miserable until they do get what they want. So over time, the trauma of being around that person um, takes its toll on the other person, and they start to um, kind of train themselves. Like the fight is just not worth it.
mhm,
So if somebody is doing these little implosions and explosions or big ones, then you start to say, well, I'm never going to do that again, or I better make sure I do this the way they wanted it. And then over time, you're doing their dirty work. So
mhm.
you're beating up on yourself. You are
Right.
forcing yourself to be wholly focused around them. The other real pinnacle trait is lack of empathy. And
Mhm,
so you'll see this with somebody who easily makes fun of other people and runs down other people, and that is enjoyable to them. And
mhm,
they not only deny other people's thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs, but they actually gain joy out of running people down and making them feel crappy, and unnerving people and sort of undoing their resolve about something. And the real severe personality disorder is defined by a delusion. So
okay.
delusion means it's lack of facts, but you believe something so hard that you're not going to let go of it no matter what. So typically what you'll find with a real narcissist is that they can lie, and nothing that comes out of their mouths is true, but they believe all of it. As soon as they think it, they say it, and then it's true. And
Mhm,
they don't need evidence to support their truth. They just adamantly insist that that's true. And the level of delusion, like the level of an inability to let go of that delusion, that determines how severe the personality disorder is.
it's interesting, all the things that you're saying, because normally when I listen to podcasts where narcissism is a topic and they're laying out the traits of a narcissist, I think the way that you're saying it makes sense to me, because other times when I'm hearing it, I'm like, oh my God, am I a narcissist? I'm hitting
Yeah.
too many of these things. So, but I also know that I will own up to myself, because I maybe I'm gonna offend people there, because there are two family members in mind that I feel like are more on the narcissism end, and then I have been in relationships with people that are the child of a narcissist, but they themselves have toxic traits. And I brought that out of them, and they brought my own toxic traits out. So I guess I want to put a pin in the narcissism specific conversation for now and move into toxic relationships, because I do think there's a difference in that maybe I don't think that person I was with or used to be friends with or was in a relationship with may have been a narcissist, but they definitely had toxic traits. But I don't think they're a toxic person. I don't think that I'm necessarily a toxic person, but I've done some very toxic and horrible things to, when you're not bringing the best. So, what is the different? Do you see what's the fine line between maybe a toxic trait and someone that's not bringing the best out of you, or when you're just a toxic person and you need to go get some help and work all that out? Does that question make sense? That was a lot I just threw at you.
That was a lot. Let
Yeah.
me see if I can unpack it. So you're right. Narcissism is only one variety of toxicity, and there are also lots of other kinds of ways of being toxic. Um, and and I think a good way to define it is that in a healthy relationship, my thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs are acceptable, loved, valued, cared for, listened to, and so are yours. In a toxic relationship, it's very one-sided.
Hmm.
And in a, and we can, like I said before, each of us can be selfish at times, or frustrated or irritated or whatever. But when we take it out on somebody in a mean way, or we're trying to bully somebody, we're trying to even implode. So sometimes I guess people talk about it as a covert narcissist, or
Hmm.
that more like implosive person. That can be just as toxic,
Hmm.
where anytime you don't feed that the emotions of that person, they implode in terms of, going all the way to suicidal ideation, and oh, you
Hmm.
don't love me, and oh, you never take care, like all of that. So we each have to have a sense of being um, a full, whole person within ourselves, and then coming into a relationship with another full, whole person. And when that's not the case, what we tend to do is we try to plug into each other and suck the life force out of each other instead of, you know, I think of it as like prayer and meditation is how I recharge. And then I come to my
Hmm.
partnership as a whole being. Or a lot of the toxicity we feel from others is oftentimes when they expect us and demand from us. Step back for a second and look at the toxic relationship within our own selves. So in my book and in my master class, I really focus in on that, because if I'm talking to myself in really negative, awful ways, I'm so stupid, I'm so this, I'm so that,
Yeah.
then I'm beating myself up more than anybody else is. And I'm also likely to resonate with somebody who is likely to be emotionally not very nice to me.
Do-
So I have to look at that first and take care of that first.
Yeah.
And then when I meet somebody who is negative, I immediately put up my walls, because I know that that doesn't resonate for me, and I don't want any part of that person and their energy. So
Hmm.
I think manipulation and level of manipulation and level of delusion, like I said, and dishonesty,
Do you
and
find
game
that it
playing
might be easier
is
for
definitely
someone
going to
to,
indicate
and I hate to
how
phrase it this
hard it
way,
is to
but if
leave.
you're in a
But also,
relationship with a
first of all, that
toxic
toxic
person versus a
relationship within yourself,
narcissist,
because if
is
you
it,
are
is
not just
there,
hooking to somebody else.
I don't
But
know a
yes,
better
you're
or a
right.
nicer
The
way of phrasing this, and
narcissism,
this is an
the lack of
incredibly ignorant
empathy,
question, but
that
is it easier to
manipulative,
leave a toxic
manipulative
relationship than perhaps a
personality is
narcissist?
really
In
tricky.
that I feel
And they
like
do
if
tend
you're
to
in a
flip the
toxic
script. They
relationship,
tend to use a
that
lot of
other person
projection,
does have the ability
where
to
they're
empathize,
basically
does have the
doing the
ability to see
things
that you're
that they're telling you
suffering,
that you're
even
doing.
if,
But
you're both
whatever
toxic to one
they are
another.
doing
It's
that they don't
might
want
be
you to
easier
notice,
to
they're
walk
going to
away.
flip the
Whereas
script and
if
say
you're
that
with a
you're being so
narcissist, they
selfish
can
and you're being
be,
so really did.
are my assumptions true that they might be more
So it gets
manipulative, therefore
somebody
making
really
it more
screwed up in the
difficult to
head.
leave that
People
relationship?
call it gaslighting, and that's exactly what it is.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah. Wow.
right, right. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I
Yeah.
was just living in Europe for the past 9 months, and I had some separation from the people that were normally in my day-to-day life. And in coming back to
Exactly.
the United States, I have noticed with certain folks that I have theorized are on that spectrum of narcissism, that there's I had to see it of, "Oh my
Hmm.
gosh, how heavy they've been gaslighting me for so many years and telling me I'm useless, that I'm a liar, that I don't know what I'm talking about, that I" yeah. So, I'm very thankful that I went out of the country for 9 months. I think if I didn't leave, I would have never been able to confront it and
It
see it
really
for what it
is,
is,
and
and
my heart
the
goes
way
out
I
to
started
you
describing
for
it
what you've
to
been
friends
through,
and family
and
members
anybody
of
who's going
when
through
I'm
that.
coming to you and saying,
The most
"Hey,
important thing you can do is really
something just
begin to take care
happened.
of yourself,
I am living in a
emotionally
world
speaking,
where
from
I'm
the
trying to
inside
let
out.
people
So if
know."
you
This is
beat
the
up
way
on
I
yourself,
only know
you've
how to
got to
describe it,
talk to
is
yourself the
the
way you do
emperor's
a
not
friend,
wearing clothes.
because
I'm trying to make
the
sure
negative
everybody
voice,
I'm
unless you're a
trying to
person
raise
that
the
goes
alarms
around
and tell
telling
them,
your
and
best
I feel
friend,
like my
get
entire
over
life,
it, you're
that
such an
person
idiot,
and the
like
people
that stuff,
surrounding them that
that
are
that
idolizing
voice
that
that beats
person
up on
for
you is not
whatever those
yours.
reasons are,
Babies are not born
um,
with that.
is telling me,
they
"No,
don't
you're
they
just
don't
nuts,
learn
that
it
you're not
unless they've
understanding.
learned it
He's
from
just wearing
somebody. So
invisible clothes, and
figure out
that's
whose voice
super
that is
cool,
and start
and
to
you're
evict
just
that
too
person
dumb to
from your
get it."
brain, because they don't belong there.
And I
Your
need
voice is the
someone
kind
when I'm
caring
going to
voice that
them
you
to
care about your
validate
friends with.
and say,
So
"Yes, I
look at
see
that
you. The
first,
emperor's
and
not
then
wearing clothes."
recognize
And some people it
how
clicked and it
to
helped,
emotionally step
in
back
how
from
to, because
toxic
other time
people. And
there's
this
so
is
many
a
times where
skill
I'll go
that
to
should be
people
taught in
in
schools,
regards to certain
seriously,
individuals,
with
and they
people
will say,
pleasing.
"Oh, but just
So
look at
what
the
happens
positive
is that if
side."
I show
And
up
I'm
as
like,
my
"No, I'm
whole
already
self,
trying to do
all my
that."
thoughts, feelings, wants,
So I
and needs
guess
from the
my
get
two
go in every
questions out of that
relationship,
part one is, if
then
you have
somebody who
someone that has
doesn't
a family
respect
member
that,
that might be the
they're either going
child
to
of
not
or in a
connect with me,
relationship
or they're
with a
going to
narcissist,
sort of
what can
bash
they
up
do to
against
help
that,
that
and I'm going to
person
disconnect from them.
just get through every
So
day?
let
Because
someone know
sometimes
that
just day to
if
day
they
is
do
very,
show
very
up
difficult.
wholly, then we can set boundaries. So if somebody is being toxic, we can hang up the phone, we can walk away, and give them sort of those little timeouts. They're kind of grown up timeouts. And then
Mhm.
sometimes some people will get a clue and stop doing that. And you can be, verbal about it. Like, I'm
Mhm.
not going to stay on the phone with you while you're screaming and yelling at me. Or I'll talk to you later when you can calm down, because this is not productive. So setting those boundaries when you show up and you're stronger, sometimes people will respect that, and that's
Right.
cool. Then you can continue that relationship and grow it and rebuild it. If they don't, if they even escalate, which a really toxic person is going to take your boundaries and they're going to escalate. They're going to implode all the way to suicide. They're going to explode all the way to violence. So that's kind of the indicator that you go, huh, that's interesting. I set a boundary. All I did was say, I don't want to be screamed
Mhm.
at, and you freaked out. yeah, this is not working. So, taking care of yourself by stepping back emotionally, setting boundaries, and then watching what happens. And that information is gold. Then you can decide what to do with that relationship.
Right.
The subtle and not so subtle manipulations are literally nonstop. So they're finding people and hooking people that will be their supply, as they call it. But they're the people who will adore them, who won't question them, who will step and fetch for them, who will beat up on somebody else for them, emotionally, even physically. So it's I heard this recently. It's like a cult of one. So they are the cult leader, and if you don't, want to drink the Kool-Aid, then you can't be part of the cult. But then they're going to get the other cult
Mm-hmm.
members to,
Mm-hmm.
emotionally beat you up and tell you you're an idiot or you're crazy or you're overly sensitive or you're so reactive and you're, this and that. And again, if that resonates with anything you're
Mm-hmm.
telling yourself, then you're really, um, really
Mm-hmm.
getting beat up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's really important to be honest, and direct, because I think sometimes people tiptoe around too much and they need to say, you seem
And
really
I
drained
saw when
since
I
you
was
started seeing this
going
person. You
through
seem
my life
exhausted, depressed,
experience of
anxious since you
that,
started
I'm
going out with this
finding,
person, or
in
every
particular,
time
I
you're
saw your
around
eyes
that
kind of light
person,
up when I
you
said there's
really
people surrounding
seem
them that
down
seem to
on
adore
yourself.
that
And I hate
person
to see that because I
and
love
think that
you.
they
I
can
care
do
about
no
you.
wrong. Is that something that you find
I want you to
common
be
with
well,
narcissists,
but
that
it seems like
somehow
that
they have
person
this
sucks the life
community
out of me,
around them
and
that
I'm
just
concerned
thinks
about
that
it.
they can do no wrong?
I
Why?
don't
And
think
if
that
so, why is that?
anybody who loves
Why
you
can't
and
they
you
see
love
what you and I
them, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that to somebody, because you're just telling the truth
see?
in love. And that's all any of us need to do ever. What happens from there, who knows? They'll probably defend the person. They'll probably, say you don't know them like I do, blah, blah, blah. But you're planting a seed and you're letting them know that you see something that maybe they're not seeing. And then recognize too that trauma bond is a profound thing. And when somebody has done this game of sort of these little mini implosions and then bigger implosions, or mini
Mm,
explosions, bigger explosions, that they have, and then every time you do it right, and I say that with
mm-hmm,
air quotes for those of you who can't see us, so when you feed that person emotionally, you placate them really well, then they're kind of giving you
mm-hmm.
little breadcrumbs to, say good job. And it's just sort of like getting fed M&Ms. So they're training you to do everything the way they want you to do it.
And if
And
you're
over time, you're
watching
training
someone
yourself.
that you love
And over
in
time, you
a
actually
relationship
feel
with a
safe with
narcissist,
them
I
and
have found
unsafe
that in my
without
personal
them. And you
experience,
feel whole with
there's
them
simply
and
just nothing
and
that you can do
completely
to get them
empty
out of it.
without
They
them.
have to
And
want it
that's completely
for
opposite.
themselves.
So
But
the
if
other
they're
thing I
coming
always
and
do with
talking
people
to
I'm working
you
with is
about
I
it and
try to
you're
help
trying to
them
help
write
them
down
through whatever
realities.
it is they need help through,
And
what's the
that's
best thing that
part
you
of what
could
I do
do
in my
as an
journaling in my book
outsider
too. Write
watching?
out
Because
the
ultimately,
realities,
like I
not
said,
the
there's nothing that
feelings,
anyone,
because we can get
I can't
lost in
get
our
them out of the
emotions.
relationship. They have to want to do it
But write out
themselves.
all the
But is there
realities,
anything
all the
simple that
most
you
terrible
could
things that have
do to
happened in
help
this
them just,
relationship, and
again,
then
go
step
through
back
day
and
by
look
day?
at it. Would you ever do something like that or say something like that to anybody for
Mm,
any reason? The answer is no. Then you are not with a person that you ought to be with, because you should have similar values. And if that person doesn't adhere to really basic human values, then you're not in the right relationship. sometimes just have to sit back and shake my head and say, that's not healthy. That's not normal. And people are kind of surprised because I think in the TikTok world, it's like people are numb to it, and they are so mean to each other so much of the time that they get numb to it.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things that people are very confused about is that narcissists look like they think they have it all together. They think they have it all, and they think that they're better than everybody else. But it's a weird
Mm.
sort of thing that's not quite accurate. And in fact, really good self-esteem is you'll see a person be very humble and very open and interested in other people. But narcissism is more like a hot air balloon, is what I use for an analogy. So they're very empty on the inside. They don't have a solid sense of self. They need to have hot air pumped into them all the time. They need to be adored and worshiped and focused on, or that balloon implodes and explodes. So it's not a high self esteem that then turns into narcissism. It's actually an emptiness. They do.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're absolutely right that teenagers they basically can fit into every diagnosis in the DSM-5. It's borderline hilarious. And when people go to social work school and grad school, they all like
So,
freak out. Oh
from
my gosh, I
your
have all these things,
books that you've,
and it's
I
just
guess from your
because
YouTube videos that
in
you
you're
post, I
learning
guess a
how to cope
surprising
with
thing was the
life
amount
on
of
life's
questions
terms.
or
You
inquiries
don't
about
want to hear no's,
narcissism.
and you freak
But
out
what
and all
has
that
been the
stuff, and that's
most, I
pretty.
feel
I
like you're
mean,
doing a very vulnerable
normal is
and
probably a
helpful
good word
thing,
for it
again, because
because
as you
it
mentioned before, in
happens more
America,
than it
access to
doesn't,
mental health care is
especially with
not as it
teenage
should be.
girls.
And we're
And
just
then
slowly but surely catching up
borderline traits
that
and
mental health
narcissistic
is
traits and
equally,
all
if
of
not
that.
more
And
important for your physical
so,
health.
yeah, that's pretty normal.
What
And
has been the most
I don't think it's
surprising
appropriate to
part
diagnose a
of this journey of
personality
doing the YouTube
disorder of any
channel, of
sort
writing your
until a
books,
person is in
of
their later 20s,
doing this in a
because that's
more
when they
public
really
way?
have started to solidify their identity and personality.
Mhm.
But the born with it or created kind of thing is still out there in the scientific land, and there does seem to be some genetic predisposition for being less empathic. So some people are less empathic, some people are more empathic genetically or biologically, organically. And then there are different things that might create that narcissism. So, like I said, it's an emptiness as a sense of self, and that can come from a number of different dynamics in the
Yeah.
family. So, some people say it's always hurt people that hurt people, and that's not true. I've known plenty of narcissists that actually came from parents who adored them perhaps too much and indulged them way too much, enabled them, put up with them, didn't set boundaries, didn't ever say no. And those
Right.
are typically a lot of the narcissists that we deal with anymore. They just simply don't think that anybody else should matter as much as they do,
Yeah.
and that their needs shouldn't matter as much as theirs do.
Okay, folks. Unfortunately, there were some technical difficulties and the recording platform wasn't fully cooperating. So the conversation did end here. And there was so much more that unfortunately everybody got to miss out on. But if you'd like to have Shannon Petrovich come for a second episode of Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast, please feel free to reach out at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. I would love to talk with her again, and I'm sure everything that she said was incredibly helpful to others. Again, sorry for the technical difficulties, but until next time, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for joining me this week for all the fun journeys and lessons learned on my big adventure called life. For more information on the different cities discussed, check out the blog posts on hieatexplorelove.com, posted every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you have any questions or fun stories to share, feel free to reach out at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. Until next week, remember to eat well, explore the world, and love yourself. See you next time. This episode is produced, scripted, and edited by me, Ashley. Special thanks to Sarah Mientka.